Happy Saturday, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon with your Free State Colorado weekly news roundup. Today is May 13th, 2023. We're going to take a look at some of the headlines of the week, read a few articles, and see what's been going on here in Colorado. So let's get started. Well, first article I want to talk about, you may have seen on the news, definitely drew some national headlines. From the Epic Times, Denver City Council member wants to tax white-owned businesses. This is from May 6th, 2023. Denver City Councilwoman Candy Sidabaka spoke out and called on the Colorado government to increase taxes on white-owned businesses and give that money to black and brown-owned businesses as a form of reparations. Sidabaka attended the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance Forum on Thursday and believes that, quote, capitalism was built on stolen land, stolen labor, and stolen resources. And a check today could not undo the cumulative impact of generations of that stolen wealth in all of those categories, Sidabaka said during the forum. And so I think it has come in the form of land, labor, and resources in an ongoing fashion. And there are structures that we have that could be flipped to begin to do that reparation. Wow. That's absolutely crazy that we have our Colorado Denver City Councilwoman who believes that taking money away from certain communities based on the color of their skin could potentially be justified. I mean, not only is this an insult to the rule of law, not only is this a complete and utter way to alienate half the population, cause social and civil strife, but it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that somebody here in Denver would be elected by voters who has these kind of attitudes. For one, Sita Baca has no clue what capitalism actually means. If she thinks capitalism was built on things that were stolen, she has no clue about what capitalism actually is as an economic system. But not only that, to think that reparations are justified is also pretty silly. And then the idea of who's going to be stolen from. I mean, this is a way you get all these white owned businesses or white managed businesses to just leave Denver in this case. I mean, you got to think that some of these locally owned businesses might be looking for that exit sign to get out of Denver, move out to a different community if this is the kind of thing they're going to face in the city. So very embarrassing, very sad, and let's hope the voters of Denver hold this council person accountable. Let's take a look at the other news stories going on. This is actually from a New Mexico website, which was pretty interesting. Denver sees hundreds of new migrant arrivals ahead of Title 42 expiration. So from May 9th, 2023, actually the article is originally from Colorado Newsline, which is a left of center for sure, a news website here in Colorado, but interesting to see this being repeated in New Mexico. Colorado Governor Jared Polis and Denver Mayor Michael Hancock co-wrote a letter to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, expressing their concern that non-border jurisdictions are not receiving the federal support they need to help the large number of migrants coming in. They asked the Department of Homeland Security to increase direct support for areas struggling to meet needs with the resources they already have. So, of course, as you may have seen, big national news about the immigration crisis going on, big surge at the southern border. Of course, May 11th, just a few days ago, Title 42 expired. Of course, the president, Biden, is pushing back a little bit and saying that, we're going to still enforce border laws. However, it remains to be seen if that's actually going to happen. So, a news release from Denver said the city has seen more than 200 people arrive each day since Thursday. And while fewer than 400 people occupied migrant shelters the week prior, over 800 people occupied the shelters as of Monday. The city said all four of its migrant shelters are quickly reaching capacity and asked for additional support from other sheltering partners, including faith-based organizations. So, of course, now, churches have been demonized by our governor and our other politicians during the COVID policies, shut down and attacked. But of course, now city government is hoping that these faith-based organizations, churches can help relieve this migrant crisis. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you've been down to downtown Denver recently, it is tent city already. It's a very sad situation. Doesn't necessarily feel like the safest place to be. And of course, with 200 people arriving each day, the question is, of course, where are they going to go? To date, the state of Colorado has spent $8.35 million and Denver has spent more than $14 million since December 2022 to shelter, feed, and otherwise support more than 7,000 migrants. Wow. So definitely an issue that is going to continue. It's interesting to see how the border crisis and what's happening down south is affecting Colorado and Denver, and what that's going to do for our local political scene. So keep an eye on that, of course. Let's move on. Related to another immigration story, this was kind of interesting. Unfortunately, it seems that Denver is such a hotbed for testing of new policies and technologies that are looking for adoption nationwide. This was from Denver7.com. ICE testing new immigrant surveillance device in Denver. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is testing a new surveillance device on immigrants in the Denver area, with plans to roll it out nationwide. But immigrant rights advocates told Denver 7 that this latest expansion of ICE's so-called Alternatives to Detention program is unnecessary, expensive, and harmful. This article is from May 11th, 2023, just updated yesterday on May 12th. The VeriWatch device looks similar to a smartwatch, but it can track a person's location in real time, scan their face, and send and receive messages from ICE officers and case managers. The device was created by BI Incorporated, a private monitoring technology company based in Gun Barrel, Colorado, just north of Boulder. ICE announced the pilot program in late April, calling it a less obtrusive manner of increasing compliance for immigrants who are not detained while they move through the legal system. 50 people are currently wearing the watches in ICE's Denver test group. None of them were in detention, and all were already showing up for their court hearings and meetings with officers, according to advocates familiar with the cases. This is not an alternative to detention. It's actually an expansion of an invasive surveillance technology, said Sienna Mann, a campaign manager with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. The watch combines surveillance technologies that BI Incorporated and its parent company, the private prison giant Geo Group, have sold to ICE for almost a decade. Since 2004, the U.S. government has paid more than $1.8 billion for the Colorado-based company to monitor immigrants who do not have criminal records and would not otherwise be detained. Very interesting to see that this smartwatch technology that can scan people's faces, track their location, send them messages, is being tested on immigrant population. Don't know what to think about this. Of course, there's a lot of concern. A lot of people might be interested, unfortunately, in giving up some of our civil liberties in order to solve the immigration crisis or problem. However, we've seen how that's worked out in the past. Excuses to expand the surveillance state and to infringe on our liberties after 9/11, after COVID, after any tragedy involving a firearm. So interesting to see. Pretty skeptical about this technology or that this is a good idea. Well, let's move on, see what else is happening. From the Great Complete Colorado, page 2, May 10th, 2023, Sherry Fife. Rushed Polis property tax bill contains glaring error, creates conflict with existing measure. So, of course, the state legislature just got out, thankfully, this week. And one of the last things they really pushed was this property tax measure that they're pushing on the ballot. Of course, because they pushed it so quickly and so fast, it's not necessarily accurate in terms of the language or what it's going to do. Let's take a look at the article. Governor Jared Polis's rushed property tax plan that took just 7 days to go from introduction in the Colorado Senate to final passage on the House floor contains more questions than answers, including whether language added in a last-minute amendment could invalidate the bill, which is slated to go to voters in November. Gosh, let's hope it gets invalidated, right? The language in the bill includes a ballot title that labels the measure as Proposition HH, which is already referred to the ballot from a previous bill. It appears the Polis property tax plan should actually be Proposition II, according to the state's election rules. Part 2 of Senate Bill 23303 sets the title of the referred measure in part with, quote, backfill counties, water districts, fire districts, ambulance and hospital districts, and other local governments to fund school districts by using a portion of the state surplus up to the Proposition HA cap as defined in this measure. Part 3 of the bill defines the HH cap as increasing annually based on the excess state revenues cap from the prior fiscal year, and, quote, adjusted for inflation plus 1% and population changes, and also annually adjusted for the qualification or disqualification of enterprises and department service changes. However, labeling ballot measures is the responsibility of the Secretary of State, not the state legislature. And how measures are labeled is laid out in the Colorado Code of Regulations, CCR. Not following proper protocol is what has caused the mess, those who understand the process say. First, the labels on referred measures are alphabetical and start in one election, where the referred measures left off from the last election. In the 2022 election, Proposition GG was the last label used. Additionally, the CCR says the Secretary of State will place any measures referred by the legislature on the ballot in the order they are received. So, Proposition HH should be given to the first referendum from the state legislature, which is House Bill 23-1290, passed on May 5th. Senate Bill 303 was passed on May 8th. Natalie Menton, a good friend of Free State Colorado, a longtime political activist from Lakewood who noticed the error, said this bill was rushed through so quickly that this is likely not the only mistake. I've been involved with ballot labeling for many years, and as I started looking through this, I realized there's already a referred measure that is HH, Menton said. This measure that they passed at the last minute should be II. Menton said she inquired with the Secretary of State's office and was told they are aware of the problem and are working with their legal counsel to figure out how to move forward. Menton said she was told there was likely to be more information by the end of the week. They rushed this bill through so fast it resembled a kid doing their homework mere seconds before it was due, Menton said. It made me laugh and cringe because who knows what other impacts are in there that hasn't been caught yet. Of course, another aspect is because these measures were passed so quickly at the end of the legislative session, these bills did not receive the proper time to be reviewed by the public for public comment. They did not receive enough time to be reviewed by the legislatures. I mean, these politicians barely know what they're voting on as it begins to begin with. But some of these bills at the last week that were just rushed through and ran through, I mean, who knows what's in them? Definitely, most likely not the politicians who voted on them. But we'll keep an eye on this. Of course, some of these ballot measures, these Polis power grabs that they're pushing for the November ballot need to be resisted, and opposition needs to mount right away. It'll definitely be a focus for Free State Colorado throughout the rest of the year. But for now, let's move on. Kind of a shocking story, a sad story. King Soopers is facing a lot of outcry because of this. This was Thursday, just a couple days ago. KDVR 31 Denver, Fox News. King Soopers fired 5 workers for stopping Shoplifter, problem solvers investigation. So, of course, crime is becoming out of control in the Denver metro area and many other places. These workers, put themselves at risk potentially to stop somebody committing a crime, to protect their business, to protect their place of employment, to protect the safety of their fellow employees. And they were rewarded by King Soopers by being fired. It's a very shameful thing. Greenwood Village, Colorado, KDVR. They thought they were doing the right thing. Instead, 5 employees at a King Soopers grocery store in Greenwood Village were terminated for holding a shoplifting suspect and calling the police. It's been more than 6 months since the employees were fired, and they still haven't received an arbitration date to hear their appeals. I think it is a travesty of justice, quite frankly, said Greg MacArthur, one of the 5 King Soopers employees. King Super security guard fired after he was punched by shoplifter. Another headline there. But the 4 other employees let go for the November 2nd incident are Teresa Maldonado, Julie Olivet, Presley Swenson, and Nagi Salimi. All 5 sat down separately with the problem solvers to talk about what each felt was a wrongful termination. Just trying to help, said Nagi Salimi, who moved to Colorado from Iran in 2017. He said King Soopers was the one and only place he had worked since immigrating to the United States. I never thought I'd be fired for this, said Presley Swenson, who had only been on the job 3 months. It's hit my family hard financially, emotionally, said Julie Olivet, who at age 62 said she was blindsided by the determination. I've lost my health insurance. I've lost all my benefits for something that's just unfair because I did nothing wrong. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I felt like my life was in danger, said Teresa Maldonado, who had worked for King Soopers for 31 years when she was fired. It was Maldonado who first spotted a man stealing a cell phone by using a box cutter to cut off a security tag. Store surveillance video obtained by the problem solvers shows Maldonado following the 54-year-old Darren Houtervet as he walked toward the exit. There's no audio on the video, but Maldonado said she told the suspect to stop, and instead, he started to run through an unmanned checkout line. As he did so, Huertavante could be seen slipping, dropping both the $20 cell phone and a blue cobalt box cutter he used to steal the knife. He immediately bends down to pick up the two items and continues running. That's when Maldonado says she yelled, "He's got a knife, he's got a knife." Maldonado's screaming seems to get the attention of her four coworkers, seen on store surveillance video standing near the self-checkout area, the exact area Huertavante was running toward to leave the store. So here is a criminal with a knife in his hand running towards other employees. I see him turn. There's a knife in his hand. I see the knife. So I have an angle to wrap him. So I wrap him up, take him down, grabbed his left hand, and removed the knife, said MacArthur, who was immediately assisted by coworker Salimi. Two customers would later assist the men in holding Hortavan on the floor until Greenwood police arrived at the store location on 6000 South Hawley Street. Wow. Police body camera video obtained by the problem solvers shows officers handcuffing Hortavant, who immediately can be heard confessing. I had a razor that I used to cut the security tag. So here we go. These employees are taking matters into their own hands to protect themselves, to protect their coworkers, and to stop a criminal in action. Unfortunately, we're seeing more of this kind of thing across the country as crime rate continues to accelerate, as people are continually pushed into poverty and potentially crime. I mean, to see what's happening, it's not surprising that people are taking matters into their own hands, trying to stop criminals. I mean, what kind of society do we want to live in? A society where criminals are just allowed to get away with everything? I mean, there's enough videos online of San Francisco and other big cities, Chicago, where criminals can run rampant. They can run through the store, can totally rip everything off. And that's why some of these big box retailers are shutting down in San Francisco and Chicago and other places. Well, we don't want that happening in Denver. These King Soopers employees do not want that happening to their business. They cared enough to stop a criminal, to stop somebody armed with a knife. Maybe it was only a box cutter, but nonetheless, it could cause some serious damage. And King Soopers should be ashamed of themselves for firing these employees. So I hope the public outcry against King Soopers, against King Soopers management for going after their employees like this, results in something. These five workers deserve better than this, and they should be hired immediately by, if not by King Soopers, by somebody else who realizes these employees actually care about the place they work and are willing to step up and stand up against crime. But let's move on. So I hope you can join me this Wednesday, May 17th. Doors open at 6 p.m. We'll be going till at least 9. The third Wednesday of every month at Liberty on the Rocks. This week I will be speaking. I'll be doing a legislative update. This is my third year doing this. As you may know, I track a lot of what happens at the legislature, keep an eye on all the bills, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I like to say. But down at the Independence Institute in Denver, hope you can join us. It's going to be a fun presentation going over kind of a recap of what happened at the legislative session this year. So, we'll talk about some of the gun bills, of course, talk about some of the other things that came down the line, in particular the property tax, the land use bills, and others. So, really hope you can join me. Brandon Wark of Free State, Colorado, to talk about local politics. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. Drinks will be provided. So doors open at 6, talks start at 7. It's going to be a really fun presentation and hope you can make it this Wednesday, May 6th, May 17th, excuse me, this Wednesday, May 17th at 6 p.m. All right, let's see what else is going on. DenverGazette.com. A house divided. Session defined by dissension between progressives, establishment, and GOP. May 11th, 2023. From DenverGazette.com. I thought this was interesting because a lot of people see Colorado's government as a uniparty, right? They see Colorado Democrats in control of everything at the state level, most of the federal offices as well, but especially in the state legislature. It's just not true in terms of all these politicians being on the same page. There's a lot of division, there's a lot of different camps, different caucuses, different interest groups really fighting it out. And that's between the different factions of the Democrats. So people need to realize it's not a total one party rule in that regard. There is some dissension. There's a lot of room to really have some activists kind of wedge themselves in there and shift policy. It's not insurmountable, as we've seen a lot this year. That's going to be something I'm going to be talking about at my talk. In the Colorado House of Representatives, the 2023 legislative session ended the same way it started, with conflict and division. Lawmakers were almost giddy Monday, spending the last day of the session playing with toys and instruments. recording sing-alongs to Bohemian Rhapsody, and sharing a meal on the balcony cooked by Rep. Weinberg. But the carnival atmosphere quickly devolved when the sun began to set. As the House considered one of the final measures of the session, Senate Bill 303, the Republican caucus staged a protest, walking out of the Capitol after Democratic leadership cut off a roughly 2-hour debate on last-minute amendments to the bill. The bill, a property tax relief proposal, has been criticized by Republicans as being rushed through the legislative process. We bring a lot of expertise to the table. Whether you agree with them or not, these voices should at least be heard, said House Minority Leader Mike Lynch, R.R. Wellington, during a news conference Tuesday. We feel that didn't happen much this session. Republicans who had been planning the walkout since the morning before date was limited did not return for a vote on Senate Bill 303 or for the last two votes of the year, repassings of amended versions of Senate Bill 88 and Senate Bill 271. They were also absent as the chamber officially adjourned for the session. The moment was a culmination of tensions present throughout the session between the chamber's supermajority and superminority. After a November election, the House only had 19 Republican members to the 46 Democrats this year, the largest Democratic advantage the chamber had seen in 85 years. So, of course, what's been going on in the state legislature? Obviously, Republicans versus Democrats. But one of the other big issues that this article continues to talk about is the progressive wing of the Democrats versus more of the establishment wing of the Democrats, where you have representatives like Elizabeth Epps and others who are actually standing up against the Democratic majority and voting against certain bills that the Democrat leadership is pushing. So, pretty interesting to see some of the splits, some of the division, something to keep an eye on. There's a lot of opportunity for Republicans to take back at least 5 House seats, in my opinion, during the 2024 election, but it's going to take the involvement of a lot of people. All right, let's move on and see what else is going on. This article I thought was pretty interesting for a few reasons. This is from apnews.com, May 5th, 2023. Colorado politicians seek power to block social media users. Colorado lawmakers pushed a bill to the governor's desk that would allow politicians to block social media users from their private accounts, just weeks after the U.S. Supreme Court announced it would consider to what extent that's legal. The bipartisan measure Colorado's Democrat-controlled legislature approved Thursday allows lawmakers to block people for any reason they choose. The rule wouldn't apply to some politicians' accounts, such as one of Governor Jared Polis' Twitter accounts, @Gov of Colorado. The idea has sparked national debate as social media becomes an increasingly popular tool for politicians to squeeze arguments into 280-character tweets, laud their successes, air their grievances, and announce official business, all of which blurs the line between personal accounts and public forums. So this article continues to go on talking about, obviously Donald Trump, some of the national implications of this, and then a little bit from the ACLU of Colorado, not too surprising from Associated Press. But what really irks me with these types of articles that Associated Press puts out and others is they don't actually link to the bill. So they talk about the bill. There's no mention of what the bill number is. There's no link to the Colorado Legislature's website with the bill. And unfortunately, this is a trend in a lot of media organizations, not just the AP, but, as a citizen, as a voter, as somebody who maybe wants to be a little bit more active in the political scene, you would think that these news organizations, these news agencies would actually link to the article. Just like in school, you were taught to kind of provide references, to provide sources to what you're talking about in your article. So, for example, here they talk about they pushed a bill to the governor's desk. There's no link to the bill. There's no mention of the bill number. So for most individuals, that kind of stops them right there. The majority of people aren't going to go search on the state legislative website to find that bill. Sometimes it's not always easy to do so and figure out which bill they're exactly talking about in the article. So it's kind of shameful. It's kind of I think a disservice to the people in the community to, hey, just link to the bill you're talking about, link to the information, provide a reference, provide a resource for people to go back to and do the research on their own. Because we don't necessarily need to believe what the AP says or any of these other news organizations. Don't believe what I say, for example. Find the link, find the thing I'm referencing, and go to that. So here is the actual article, the link to the bill on the Colorado General Assembly website, leg.colorado.gov. It's House Bill 1306 for anybody interested. But I mean, how easy is it for the Associated Press and others just to link to the bill so people can go do their own research? Public use of elected officials' social media. Concerning the use of social media, administered by an elected official that is not supported by government resources, and in connection therewith, allowing an elected official to restrict or bar an individual from using the social media administered by the elected official for any reason, including attempted to chill the speech of another individual. Wow. So, bullying, harassment, intimidation, of course, politicians get that all the time, sometimes deserved. But what's interesting, you can see the history of the bill on the state website, of course. Bill history, looking at where it's at in terms of its votes. So, of course, passed the Senate, passed the House, went to the governor's desk. 43 to 20 votes there, and 26 to 9 votes in the Senate. Interesting. So, there's the actual bill for anybody interested. You'll find the link, of course, at freestatecolorado.com. Well, let's move on. From Think Different, Denver Post Sunday columnist. Here we go, Krista Kafer from May 11th, 2023. Pretty interesting article. This is Krista Kafer's Substack. Some of her articles have been very interesting, very engaging, informative over the years, and this one, of course, continues that trend. Legislature wants to rob Peter to pay Peter. The initiative would provide marginal relief to taxpayers by taking from taxpayers. Like other Colorado homeowners, I opened a little white envelope this week and found out my property taxes were going to go up, way up. My home's value is 57% higher than before, which means I could pay $1,400 more in taxes next year. Adjunct professors aren't one percenters. We're more like Starbucks employees, minus benefits and free coffee. Property values, which are reassessed every 2 years and odd numbers years, went up in the Denver metro area by 35 to 45%. Some of us even got luckier. During the last week of the legislative session, Democrats announced they are here to help. In a departure from their usual rob Peter to pay Paul redistributionist schemes, their best idea was to rob Peter to pay Peter. They voted to place an initiative on a ballot asking voters to provide themselves property tax relief by, in effect, raising income taxes. If it gains voter approval, the initiative will lower the state's assessment rate on residential property from 6.98% to 6.7% of the value of their home. I did the math. That's a reduction of less than 1%. Imagine a store advertising a giant sale or giant less than 1% sale. The initiative also exempts $40,000 of the home's value from the assessment. It would limit revenue increases for local government, except for school districts, which take the lion's share of property taxes. Local governments could still vote to exceed the cap. Worst of all, the state will confiscate part of taxpayers' refunds under the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights tabor. They insist that the state must backfill funds to local districts, even though districts are set for a windfall of cash, even with the proposal's minuscule reduction in the valuation rate. The proposal will also raise tabor limits in future years so the state can keep more of your money, a goal Democrats have had since the voters approved tabor in 1992. Last year, these same Democrats championed tabor refunds. That was an election year. Now they're championing this referred ballot measure with, "We're here to save the day" fanfare. This could not be more disingenuous. Democrats know residential property taxes would rise when they pushed for repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. Without Gallagher, there is nothing to restrain the rise of residential property taxes as values increase. Ironically, the repeal proposal led with the phrase, quote, "without increasing property rates," fooling the average voter into thinking property taxes wouldn't increase. Rates need not increase for homeowners to pay substantially more. The sly bit of wordsmithing may have made a difference during the election, but in reality, it's a distinction without a difference, akin to "no, officer, I wasn't texting, I was tweeting." With housing demand outstripping supply, rising inflation, and a Gallagher out of the way, home values were guaranteed to rise. Democrats knew this, yet 2 months ago they killed a Republican bill to cap property tax increases. Then, in the final 6 days of the legislature, they offered a Rube Goldberg contraption of a proposal that only provides marginal relief to taxpayers by taking from taxpayers. Wow. So, interesting article. Krista Kafer definitely pushing some good information out there. But yeah, I mean, the legislature, how disingenuous they are. They knew this was going to be a problem during the entire legislative session. They had all year, multiple years, to really try and solve Colorado's property tax crisis that's coming. These increased property rates are going to push some people out of their homes, raise costs tremendously. Of course, costs of everything are going up. And then to get a big property tax bill is just adding insult to injury. Of course, waiting until the last minute to force through something that maybe they didn't want to be debated. Maybe they didn't legislature didn't want to have public input. That's my guess. And so they kind of wait to the last minute, push this through, paint it as a solution, hope the taxpayers, hope the voters don't realize what they're trying to pull on us. But it needs to get out there. It needs to be stopped for sure. Moving on to the last article of the week from Complete Colorado, page 2, John Caldara, May 10th, 2023, Remembering a More Tolerant Colorado. So John Caldara goes, I'm honored to abuse this space to opine on the political downfall of the once liberty-loving state of Colorado. But the state has lost something more than personal and economic freedom, though it's harder to put a precise measurement to it. We have lost being nice. I miss Coloradans being pleasant, helpful, and joking around with each other, particularly with strangers. Coloradans used to be light, pleasant, enjoyable. In a different age, one might use the word gay. Coloradans have become rude, judgmental, and tribal. Maybe it's bound to happen as more groups control and command how other groups should live, work, commute, even talk. Growing up here, Colorado seemed damn near without classes, without a sense of one group of people being superior to another group. There was a time you'd see two men walking down the street, each wearing jeans and plaid flannel shirts. One of them could be making a living throwing chains on an oil rig. The other could be the wealthy owner of a petroleum company who owned that rig, and you wouldn't have the slightest clue who was who. Folks weren't always out to find personal offense as they seem to be now. Today, to be a Coloradan is to be righteous, angry, and always a victim. I was just reminded of it again. I've been lobbied by friends and family to try this wild new thing called Trader Joe's, which they claim has been around for decades. Personally, if you can find something at Costco, is it really worth buying? Why buy a bottle of ketchup when you can buy a barrel of it that can rot in your cupboard? That's just good, plain man thinking. So, to prove I can try something new, I took my son to Trader Joe's in the most accepting, tolerant, friendly town in the state, Boulder. You might recall my 18-year-old son has Down syndrome. It is very obvious by his appearance he is severely developmentally delayed. Whenever my son, Chance, and I are together, it's playtime. We joke and clown around, trying to include those around us because, well, it's fun. When we got to the Trader Joe's checkout, there were two open stations, one with a male attendant, one female, both in their mid-20s. Playfully, I said to Chance, which lane should we choose, the one with the guy or the lady? And then smiling at both, letting them know I was playing with my son, I said tongue-in-cheek, I think you should choose the one with the pretty girl. At this, the male clerk turned his playful moment into a teachable moment for this clearly uneducated, hateful older man. He schooled us by saying clearly for all around in the opposite of a playful way, F the binary, F the binary. Apparently, I sinned by delineating him from his coworker based on an obvious biological sex. As we were leaving, he volunteered his next opinion to us. Ignorance is bliss. I assume that was directed at me and not my mentally delayed son. Yes, this was only one little vignette, but it is a perfect example of the new Colorado. It's the intolerant bullying of the new enlightened, tolerant class, and they are here to let us know who's in charge. So, kind of a sad story from John Caldara there, but very interesting. And a reminder that people should be a little more respectful, a little more tolerant, and accepting of others. And, Colorado's kind of more libertarian leaning, live and let live attitude is something that I think is still pretty prominent out there, but unfortunately it has faced some decline, from this less tolerant kind of almost woke, I guess is the way to put it. I hesitate to use that word, but kind of segment of the population that wants to really define everybody and put them into a box. Well, anyways, hope you have a great weekend. It's warming up out there, kind of drying up, so it's going to be a beautiful day, beautiful weekend for everybody. But take care. Hope you enjoy this great spring. We'll see you next week. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com.